on anything to do with sort of spirit or religion, nature sort of seems to be the one which, if there's any chance of a connection, it's with that one. But with because it's something they can see and sort of feel good by looking at, let's say, or being in.
Looking at's more accurate.
Looking at.
Spectating.
Spectating. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. How? I guess it's a question I'm always like: have we completely left the Garden of Eden as such, and there's no way of going back, or is there a chance that man can sort of at least experience some level of connection with soul through nature? Or what are your opinions on that front?
Well, there we have to make a distinction between personal psychology and the interiority or the soul of our culture or of the world. We have to make a distinction. They're not separate, but they're distinct. So it's perfectly, we are perfectly capable to have a relationship with, like, I know people, and I've worked with people who have a relationship with living nature. So when they address nature, sometimes they get spoken to. That's the enchanted world, and they experience that. I don't have a problem with that at all. But that's in the personal realm. Some people, I think Steiner was such a person, have access to an enchanted world that is forever closed to the rest of us. So that's the important thing. Various people, various individuals can have an idiosyncratic, to look at it that way, relationship to nature, where they speak to nature and nature guides and advises like it always has. A famous example is Findhorn in Scotland, where they went up to this, Dorothy McLean, I think was her name. They went up to this barren land in Scotland, and she was able to talk to the plant genii, the plant spirits, and they told her how to plant, what to plant, to grow vegetables in this very barren landscape, and they succeeded. Now she got to that by being taught by the spirits. Modern agriculture has nothing to do with that whatsoever. Modern agriculture is basically ruled by technology, and you plant what you want to plant. You put the fertilizers in, you kill off the insects, spray, and take as much territory as you want, even if you turn Kansas into a dust desert, into a desert, and cut down all the trees. You do what you want. That's the will. So that you can see there are two different relationships to soul there. This one, the big one, the one that's dominating world agriculture, for example, for them soul doesn't exist. We just do what we want. But for somebody like Dorothy McLean or other open individuals, they have an ongoing intercourse with plant life or animal life, and they're addressed and they know their place. It's very humble, and they get taught and they do what they're told, and it flourishes. But it's all spiritual. You can have both running at the same time. And that's the kind of very complex world we live in. So if you want to talk about how our culture's going, you really have to address the interiority of our civilization or of our modern culture, and there you'll find in an evidential way a complete lack of interest in soul life governing our actions. That's important, governing our actions and the way we comport ourselves. But on the private sphere, you can always find people who have a genuine relationship to a living world that has long departed. So the world can be obsolete, logically obsolete, as far as the modern world goes. So there'll be no possibility of having a conversation. But people do live in these little sub-worlds where it's still alive and living and addressing them and um, guiding and correcting and so on, and sometimes leading them into their death. Yeah. And that way has been around for a long time. But our modern world wants nothing to do with it. So you really have to ask two different questions about soul life. What's the soul life of this person? And because they're embedded in the modern world too, we can ask what's the soul life of the real world, our modern world, as it plays through their life. Usually they've got to seal themselves off in some sort of bubble.
Well, I mean, I was just thinking, I guess for myself personally, but I'm sure for a lot of people that can lead to a fair bit of conflict, you know. And
most people, yeah, that's very true, Sam. And also a lot don't feel the conflict. They live in the bubble,
mm-hmm.
and then they come out of it and behave another way. But there's a dissociation there, and a lot of people are not troubled by the dissociation. They just move from one side to the other. But if you do want to bring both into a relationship, you're in for a ride. A very distressing ride. Really.
It raises two questions for me. I guess one would be, is there a way to proceed separating the two in a healthy way, or does some integration need to be done? And this going on this ride, how can one go about that?
Well, I think that's it's not something that's a choice. It's given to some people not to worry about the dissociation. Like a scientist who does his science without anything to do with soul, but before he goes into his office, he hangs a horseshoe over his office. This is a real story. He hangs a horseshoe over his office door for good luck. Two worlds having nothing to do with each other. You'll get some scientists talking very feelingly and lovingly about nature and what have you, and then they'll go out and make a nuclear bomb, and they're not troubled by that. So that's the state that Jung noticed. The state of the world is split, and we're just not troubled by it. So those people who are troubled by it, I would say it's given to them to be troubled by it. It's not something you can just make up. You notice it because something's been given to you to notice the dissociation. You know, like I have my own personal relationship to all of the creatures in my yard and so on. But at the same time, I go to work and I've got I'm working on a terminal all day. They're not gelling. You know, that's a kind of Neo moment, you know, in the Matrix where he gets troubled and he doesn't know what he's troubled by. That's the beginning, and I think that's given to some people to be so troubled, and then it's, well, okay, it's going to be a ride. But I think there's some meaning in that.
Well, where do you fall on that, and how is your journey? If that has been given to you,
it has.
It has, yeah.
Yes.
So let's.
All of my writing comes out of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just at first, I was pretty much in. It could also be called the world of the ideal world. For me, it was a world of myth, obsolete myth. But my preference was the Celtics, the King Arthur story. So my life unfolded in tune with those myths, getting involved in relationships that reflected that myth. And it couldn't find a way into the modern world. So that began to disturb me. And I had no idea what to do because, but gradually I was brought out of that world into the modern world, and there fell into the problem of meaningless after being in a world of meaning that was ideal, in other words, not grounded in reality. And the result was just horrendous. I had to learn to start off with to value the world that in fact I'd been born into. As an adult, I was still sort of childlike in this ideal world of myths and fantasies and you know, all, state conditions of the world that no longer existed. Trying to imagine myself there and that sort of thing. And coming out into the real world and the shock it delivered and the nihilism, I had to learn how to see this. The ideal world was way up here, and I didn't like that world at all, so I stayed out of it until I crashed down. And then I had to raise that one up, like, is it worthwhile my being in the modern world? In what way would it be worthwhile when this rich mythological world that I lived in has been taken from me? And I'm now in the modern world, and I could think these thoughts because I was an adult when it happened. How can I raise them up? Raise up my estimation of the real world till at least they match. The past and the present are equally privileged. How can I? And that was the task. How can I do it? And I had to find people who did privilege the real world as much as their own investment in soul and spiritual life. And that's so they passed that on to me. Yes, this world is this. Through instruction, like every adult has to learn to attune themselves to the world they're born into, and anything else is neurotic. So we have to do that. But then what do you do about the problem of the soul, which we once lived in and were ruled by, and now it seems to be absent? That becomes the question of our times, that some people who are placed in the position that I was have to grapple with. How do I address soul, which I knew and lived in for so many years, and now it's departed, withdrawn? How do I? But it's precious. It was precious to me. How do I find my way to it in the contemporary world picture?